Occupied by his daily affairs, he finds little time to contemplate such questions, except for those moments on a clear night when man pauses and looks to the star-filled heavens, and in his mind stirs an unanswered question. He searches his thoughts for an explanation, a key to the faint, forgotten memory of his past. And perhaps at that moment, somewhere else in the universe, on a distant planet similar to his own, somewhere on the other side of our galaxy, other intelligent beings wandered too, and set out in airships on an adventure through space to search for their answers.
November 2nd, 1967. Two men are driving west of Loveland, Texas. The night is clear and still. Then around 11 p.m., they have an extraordinary experience.
Come on, let's get out and check it.
After the object disappears, their lights come back on. The engine restarts, and they hurry to notify the police. Later, the Air Force investigates their story and 15 similar reports before concluding that a form of globular lightning was responsible for the sightings. But there are many other possible explanations. What you're witnessing is based on fact. Some will find it fascinating. Some may find it frightening. But it is all true. With special thanks to NASA and the Department of Defense for their cooperation in our search for UFOs. It has begun.
The Old Testament, Ezekiel chapter 1. It came to pass that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. Out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures. They had the likeness of man. Now, as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color beryl, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. And when they went upon their 4 sides, and they turned not when they went. As for their rings, they were so high, they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them 4. And when the living creatures were, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels lifted up.
This account took place some 500 years before Christ. Other accounts very similar appear in earlier ancient writings. The Greeks and Romans also are known to have made observations of such things as phantom chariots appearing in the night sky. Records also tell us that during the reign of Charlemagne, there were many accounts of encounters with tyrants of the air and their aerial ships. These accounts so concerned Charlemagne that those reporting such strange phenomena were subject to torture and death. Here is one recorded event given between the 8th and 9th century in France.
One day, among other instances, it chanced at Lyon that 3 men and a woman were seen descending from these aerial ships. The entire city gathered about them, saying that they were magicians sent by Charlemagne's enemy to destroy the French harvest. In vain, the 4 innocents sought to vindicate themselves, saying that they were their own country folk and had been carried away a short time since by miraculous men who had shown them unheard of marvels. Luckily, the Bishop of Lyon pronounced the incident as false, saying it was not true these men had fallen from the sky, and what the townfolk said they had seen there was impossible. The people believed what their good bishop said rather than their own eyes, and set at liberty the 4 ambassadors from the ship.
The date was November 12th, the year 1887. The time was near midnight aboard the sailing ship Siberian, when it was reported that several people aboard ship witnessed a huge sphere of fire. It was observed arising out of the ocean. It rose to an altitude of 16 meters, then flew against the wind and came close to the ship, then dashed off toward the southeast. This sighting lasted a full 5 minutes.
Within the years 1896 and 97, mysterious airships were reported all across the United States. In Oakland, California, a group of streetcar passengers reported a winged cigar that sent out a stream of bright light. The sighting spread through Colorado, Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and many other states, particularly in the Midwest. On April 11, 1897, Walter McCann of Rogers Park, a few miles north of Chicago, took a photograph of an airship. The New York Herald, as well as the Chicago Herald Tribune, pronounced the plates as being genuine and not a fake.
Dr. Jacques Vallée, international authority on the UFO experience.
The first thing I'd like to dispel is a frequent misconception that UFOs are limited to this country. Very often people ask me, how come I never hear about UFOs in other parts of the world? How come we only hear about UFOs in America? Well, UFOs are not an American phenomenon. They are a worldwide phenomenon. That's one of their most dramatic characteristics. The first major wave of sightings, and sightings tend to come in very intense series over a couple of months, over a given region of the world. The first such major wave occurred over Scandinavia in 1946. There was a major wave in this country in 1947, mainly in the western states. And then there have been waves in the US in 1950, 1952, and so on. And there have been intense concentrations of sightings in Africa, in Latin America, in Mexico, in the Soviet Union, in the People's Republic of China, Australia, New Zealand, and on and on and on. I don't know of any single country that has not had a series of UFO sightings. May 1975, Manitoba, Canada. Unidentified flying objects have been reported over the small town of Carmen. The objects have been seen by many witnesses over a period of several weeks. May 13, 1975, cameraman Alan Carr of station CKY in Manitoba photographs 2 separate sightings over Carmen in front of 4 witnesses. The first sighting occurs at approximately 10:30 p.m. The object appears to be stationary just above the ground. Then, almost simultaneous with a flash which appears in the sky, the object moves north at blinding speed. Only when the film is later analyzed in slow motion does Carr realize what he has captured photographically. Approximately an hour later, a second sighting occurs. The object appears over a group of trees and moves from left to right at an apparently low relative altitude to the horizon. Again, slow motion analysis provides a fascinating study of this unexplained event.
On June 30th, 1973, Jean Bigot of the Astrophysical Institute flew over Chad aboard the Concorde, packed full of scientists and scientific apparatus. At 17,000 meters altitude, in the twilight of a total eclipse, Mr. Bigot photographed the horizon with his camera. When the photo was enlarged, one of the slides showed what you're now seeing. If you look closely at this photograph, it resembles exactly what has been cited by many Americans during 1973 and 74. Although NASA takes no official position as to the UFO phenomena and their probable explanation, nevertheless, there remains on the record several unexplainable sightings by Gemini, Apollo, and Skylab astronauts. The first sighting occurred during Gemini 4 in June of 1965. Astronaut Jim McDivitt suddenly spotted a cylindrical object with arms and antenna. And when seen against the day sky, it appeared white or silvery. The object then appeared to be moving toward the craft. Suddenly, they lost sight of it. During the sighting, the astronauts were able to take these photographs and movie films of the UFO. Gemini 5, later that year, after 3 days and 5 hours into their mission, were contacted by Houston Control Center, advising the astronauts that Houston had picked up and was tracking another object, which was pacing Gemini across the entire United States. They estimated the UFO between 2,000 to 10,000 yards from the craft, and as large as the Gemini craft itself. Because of the limitations of viewing area aboard their capsule, no visual contact was made. Radar continued to track the object until they passed the Ascension Islands in the Atlantic. It then disappeared. Gemini 10 crew, Collins and Young, picked up objects traveling together in orbit. A positive identification has to date not been made. This photo was taken during the Gemini 11 flight on the 18th revolution, 27 hours and 47 minutes after liftoff. September 13th, 1966. This UFO was tracked visually and recorded on film by the crew and is truly considered unidentified by the photo interpretation experts at NASA. Perhaps the strongest and most spectacular of all the sightings took place aboard Apollo 11 on its way to the moon for the first moon landing. The ship was 1 day out, on July 16th, 1969, when they spotted an unusual object. It had a sizable dimension to it. At first, the crew thought it was the Saturn IV booster rocket and called Houston for confirmation. Houston informed them the booster in question was some 6,000 miles away. The object remains unknown. During the Skylab 3 second manned flight, on the 23rd day of 1973, at sunrise, a series of 4 exposures were made by the crew of a visually sighted unidentified flying object, or satellite, as considered by the NASA Photo Interpretation Laboratory. The Skylab crew noticed a large star-shaped object, brighter than a planet or star. They watched it for about 10 minutes. They estimated its distance as from 30 to 50 nautical miles from Skylab. It, too, remains an unknown, despite North American air defense and NASA's attempt to identify it.
Come on, let's get out and check it.
other side of our galaxy, other intelligent beings wondered too, and set out in airships on an adventure through space to search for their answers.
November 2nd, 1967. Two men are driving west of Loveland, Texas. The night is clear and still. Then around 11 p.m., they have an extraordinary experience.
Occupied by his daily affairs, he finds little time to contemplate such questions, except for those moments on a clear night when man pauses and looks to the star-filled heavens, and in his mind stirs an unanswered question. He searches his thoughts for an explanation, a key to the faint, forgotten memory of his past. And perhaps at that moment, somewhere else in the universe, on a distant planet similar to his own,